And welcome back to Small Biz Matters here on Triple H 100.1 FM. Are you ready? Strap yourselves in. Get ready to take some lists, to be informed, to work out what you have to do, because if you didn't check today's date, it is the 30th of June. And like all end of financial years, we have someone here from the ATO explaining to us what they need to see, what they're expecting from us, what we need to do as small business owners, what obligations we need to remember, but importantly, how they're helping us out during this weird and wonderful time of COVID and bushfires and drought and crises just piled on top of one another. So today I've got Andrew Watson, who is the Deputy Commissioner in charge of small business experience at small business at the Australian Tax Office. And I have to ask firstly, Andrew, always, how do you fit all of that on a business card?
I don't. It just sits on the business card as Assistant Commissioner of Small Business. Try to keep it simple so that it actually doesn't run on and on and on. But at times, yes, the full title is a bit of a mouthful. And
of course, you have simplified things. I have to first of all take my hat off to the small business team at the ATO over the last few years. It seems to be more streamlined. It seems to be a little bit easier. You're administrating all of the legislative requirements that are given to you. And I must say I'm quite grateful that it was the ATO that was announced as looking after JobKeeper, because I was almost a sigh of relief when I knew that was the organisation that was looking after it, because I thought, okay, it's going to be fine now. They know what they're doing. We're going to be okay. So well done for navigating that treacherous landscape that we've had in the last few weeks. But today, of course, is the 30th of June. And as well as everything else, we've got the end of financial year to think about with our normal, regular obligations, which don't go away as small business owners. So let's first talk about what small businesses can do to prepare for tax time 2020.
Okay, probably sort of, as you said, Alexi, probably one of those key things that we do talk about every year is keeping good records. And as much for a small business, it's probably having those records in order. Over 90% of small businesses get a tax agent to do their tax return at the end of the year. I know from speaking to tax agents and to bookkeepers, it makes their life so much easier when their small business client has things organised around that. So the responsibility for record keeping, it does sit with the business owner. So even if you do have a bookkeeper helping you out, it's still your responsibility to make sure that's all there tidy. So we kind of suggest you make sure, first kind of golden rule, keep all the records relevant to running your business, whether it's starting up, whether it's as you're running it or as you're closing it. Keep them in a format where they can actually last and not be altered. So I know personally with my individual income tax return, you get some of those receipts from a place like Officeworks or Bunnings on that thermal paper. In 5 years' time, they might disappear. So, scanning them as a PDF, storing them electronically, that's all really good sort of practices to do for business as well. Keep them for 5 years, as I mentioned. Have them in a way that if we do need to ask a question, you can easily bring them and produce this for us. And have them in English or converted into English. Particularly that's more relevant if you've got some international transactions.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that actually, because when we talk about receipts, obviously it's just as important and pertinent to have receipts, say, if you're doing international travel. When you say convert it to English, is it sufficient to just write on the top in your writing, like a little, this is what it is and this is how much it was and how much I paid for it? Is that a kind of a considerate declaration?
Yeah, if it's then and say, it had been an overseas trip to Germany and the rest of the receipts in German, it's around about being easily converted to English. So if it's a standard sort of receipt, if we needed to, we could give it to a German-speaking person and they can understand it and see that your handwritten note of, it was accommodation expenses for a work trip, all makes sense. So it's not you don't need to go and get everything translated yourself. It's about it being able to be translated if needs be. But that tip, Alexi, of actually keeping, just making a little note on the top corner or whatever, so you actually understand what it is. That'll help you if you need to then produce the receipts down the track and help your bookkeeper and your accountant.
Yeah, or if you're coding it like 8 months later and you're like, what on earth was that? Yeah, you can remember what it was because you would have had multiple receipts from that country and you don't know which one's a taxi and which one's a $400 meal.
Exactly.
So record keeping, that's good to know that it still rests on the business owner. And of course, don't forget out there, guys, there's loads of software out there that's to help you maintain those records, keep those records, and some really great photo recognition out there to recognise what's coming off the receipts as well. So it takes a lot of the hard work away from you if you need to. So explore that if you haven't already. So the receipts are very important, and they're still just as pertinent even though we've got bank statements. This is something that I asked Deborah about last year. Even though we've got bank statements, we still need to have the evidence to show what everything is, right?
You're right, Alexi. It's a really key thing that the bank statement shows that you've spent the money. It doesn't show what it's been spent on and doesn't give that link to being, an allowable deduction versus, private expense, etc. So the receipts are really important.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got our everything together. Everything's ready. It's all wrapped up in a nice, neat bow because we've been saving all our receipts throughout the year. What's next?
Well, I think they've got this, as you said, it's a bit of a different year that particularly the last sort of 4 or 5 months that we've been through. So there's probably a few things that might be worth keeping in mind for small business owners this year in tax time. Working from home and home office expenses. Now, we know a lot of small businesses have actually changed the way they've operated or have been people that have started home-based businesses out of this, or have had a combination of maybe employment income where they've been forced to work from home, as well as their home-based business. One of the key rules is generally a lot of those home-based business expenses have a private and a business proportion. So apportionment is a key thing for people to take account of there. There is something this year that a simplified method that's been introduced from period of 1 March to 30 June. Now, it was mainly introduced to help, employees who've been pushed to work from home, but it can apply for small business owners as well. It's a flat rate of 80 cents in the dollar. What to keep in mind for the hours that you've worked from home. What you need to keep in mind with that method is it's an all-encompassing deduction. So if you're doing that, you can't then say, depreciate the desk that you might have bought or the office chair or some of that other equipment. A lot of people who've had a home office for a number of years, they would be used to those sort of rules where they actually apportion some of the what we call the occupancy costs. So it might be that, part of the mortgage or the rent you're paying on the house, if you've got a dedicated home office, some of your running expenses, your power, your gas, etc. What is probably key this year is probably if previously you might have had a fairly stable pattern of how you've used your home office, it's possible it's going to be quite different this year. So just keep that in mind as you work through which option is right for you, because you've got choices. You've got choices there, but that apportionment of making sure you do allow for, particularly if it's the home part of a home-based business, you're living in there. There's a personal component that you can't claim for.
Just on that note, I know that a lot of small business owners kind of assume that some of their small business home office expenses are apportioned out by their accountant. It's a really good idea when you're having that end of financial year chat with them to ask them what system they're using, because it might not be appropriate for you. And at the end of the day, it's your responsibility to be reporting correctly. So you need to have that conversation with your accountant. Are they using this new 80% method? Are they using some arbitrary figure? Have they been carefully apportioning out? Have you done a log? So there's, as Andrew mentioned, there's several different ways that you can figure this out. And with the new options for small business working from home from the 1st of March, that's another thing as well. Basically, just make sure you've got all of those deductible expenses, potential deductible expenses like your utilities, like your rent. Ask your accountant about what's appropriate for you to deduct. Have it all in one place so that the accountant can actually work with actual figures when they're working out what to apportion.
Absolutely, Alexi. I think the thing I constantly hear from accountants is the more they're informed of their clients' circumstances, the better advice they can give. So, absolutely, I think if you go to your accountant with that information, as I said, things may have changed. Some people, it might not have changed that dramatically. For others, it has. It allows your accountant then to be able to more easily look through what are the options and what might be, under the law, the one that gives the best outcome for you. And
as always, be careful of double dipping. If you're still working full-time in an office, don't assume that you can also cover this 80%. Because you have to be, reasonable with what you can claim, and just make sure that it actually matches what your circumstances are.
Yeah, and the 80 cents in the hour one, you still do need, like all expenses, a record. So whether that's a diary which shows the hours you're working from home, or timesheets, or if you're in a business just around. Generally, it's the diary which shows where you've been, where your client appointments are, particularly if you've switched to client appointments through Zoom or other mechanisms, just where they've been. That sort of record helps demonstrate why you're claiming so many hours.
Yeah, exactly. So just keeping good record keeping, that's not just about those receipts, but it's also about keeping a diary which is accessible in a few years' time. So you can say, yep, here's an example of how I was at home for those 4 months because the office was closed down and I wasn't able to actually attend the office. We're going to take a quick break here on Small Biz Matters. If you've just joined us, we're speaking to Andrew Watson, one of the Deputy Commissioners at the ATO, all about end of financial year preparedness. We're going to take a break here on Triple H and we'll be back after. And welcome back to Triple H 100.1 FM. If you've just joined us, you're listening to Small Biz Matters, and we have an end of financial year special. We have one of the Deputy Commissioners, Andrew Watson, from the ATO. Now, don't forget, if you miss any of today's program, you can, of course, catch up via our website, smallbizmatters.com.au, or listen to podcasts via iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen to them, and listen to this interview in full because it is jam-packed with information. Now, just before the break, Andrew, we were speaking a little bit about, record keeping and the importance of understanding that it's your responsibility. And you also mentioned that things have changed slightly to allow a little bit more deductibility of home office expenses for people who have been trapped inside their houses since the 1st of March, which is very kind. Now, tell me a little bit about this word that's floating around at the moment, which is e-invoicing. What should small business need to know about e-invoicing from now onwards? Why is that something we should be aware of?
Look, e-invoicing is something that's being rolled out through accounting software for small business owners, but it's a standard way that electronic invoices can be sent between different businesses and government agencies. So it's really about business-to-business transactions. What it means by being standardised is it means your computer, regardless of what accounting software you use, will then be able to talk to other businesses' computers regardless of what software they use, because it'll be a standardised one. So people might be familiar that, if you're doing invoices between 2 Xero users or 2 MYOB users, there can be ways that makes that pretty seamless. This creates a system of interoperability. So we've just started to see it being rolled out into some software that small business uses. We expect more by the end of this calendar year. We now have some government departments who are able to accept e-invoices and are committing to pay small businesses quicker.
Ooh, the magic words.
If they send an e-invoice. Yeah, so it's a good news for cash flow, and cash flow is really important, even more important than ever in the current environment. What is also the other part is then with larger businesses that don't use off-the-shelf accounting software. Likewise, they're developing their systems around to be able to accept e-invoices. So it's not something a small business owner needs to jump out and do something extra about. It's around just staying in tune with what features are available in the software you use, and I'm hoping all the small business listeners do use some accounting software, because we find we see more successful businesses. Software is a key part of it. But sort of stay tuned into what is in your software and when it comes out, and it'll be one of those ones over the next 12 months. We expect there'll be more and more adoption between, as I said, government departments, small businesses, larger businesses, as more and more people will be able to exchange e-invoices and get the benefits of not having to type things in, invoices going to the wrong address, invoices having wrong information on it so they can't get paid on time, or their delays. So we are hopeful it'll be something that will be a good cash flow for a boost for small business, in that they'll be able to get paid quicker by the other people.
It's definitely a good top-down solution because we know that this is coming from government, and the encouragement for this to happen so that people can get paid faster is really good. Now, there's one other quite significant change that's happened in the last 12 months, which is STP finalisation. So anybody who employs right now should already be familiar with the expression STP, single touch payroll. How is STP finalisation different from the old payment summary methods, or for anybody who's a little bit older, the old group certificate methods? How is it different?
It's quite different. For a start, there is no paper or virtual paper, if you want, compared to the old system. We've actually got, Alexi, 500,000 businesses will be finalising on STP for the first time this year. It was about 200,000 last tax time, so really big increase in there, which is fantastic that we've now got the vast majority of employers onto STP. The key thing to do under the old system would be an end of year producing the payment summaries and doing a reconciliation report to the ATO. Within single touch payroll, it's a process called year-end finalisation. So it's really that's the bit that small businesses need to can do after the last payday for the year. When the employer runs that finalisation, the data gets sent to the ATO, which effectively says, yes, these amounts for all these employees for that year are now the year-end numbers, and we can use that to put into pre-fill for tax agents or for people using MyTax. It's the equivalent of issuing the old payment summary or as you said, the group certificate for people who can remember those colourful paper-based forms from a few years ago. And you don't need to provide a copy of the payment summary to your employees anymore if you're on single touch payroll. So one thing we have had last year, which just is really important for small employers, is you do need to do that finalisation process in your software. Some people think once they've done the last payroll run for the year, it'll automatically happen and mark the what we call tax ready for the information for their employees. You need to go through that last step of finalisation. That gives you a chance, or your accountant or bookkeeper a chance, just to double check there aren't any sort of things missing or anything from year end to do it before that's finalised.
Yeah.
Small employers have till 31 July to do that. Larger employers, so 20 or more, it's the 14th of July. But we encourage, particularly given this very different tax time, encourage employers to, if they can do it before that, it'll help their employees because then their data's ready, and we know lots of employees, lots of people looking to do their tax early this year if they're expecting a refund. So really key part of getting the tax right is the more pre-fill information is available. So that's a part that small business that employ people can play a part in helping us out with that.
And accounting software has made that particularly easy because it is really just a matter of pushing a button in a lot of cases. But I would say as well, just eyeball your payroll, just have a quick glance at it and make sure that it all balances. Like make sure that you haven't, missed something or overpaid someone or underpaid someone. It's worth looking at those accounts just to make sure that they all look right and they're all balanced before you hit that STB button. And this is a really good time to engage with your BAS agent bookkeeper just to help make sure that everything is tied up neatly in a bow before you finalise. Obviously, you can make corrections, but maybe do it before you hit that finalise button. But don't mean that you hold back on hitting that finalise button because you do need to consider your employees who are waiting on that tax refund.
Yeah, and just one final tip around STP. STP can come in and join it at any stage in the year. It doesn't just need to be from the first payroll event of the year. So if you're an employer that, say, started on STP in February this year, when you start on STP, you would have given the ATO all the data for the first part of the financial year. You don't need to do the old payment summary information as well as finalise on STP. If you finalise on STP, you've done all you need to do for this year. We've had some people in the past try to do both, and it's just it creates a lot of mess and duplication for everyone. But it's one of those unique things, the way STP was done, that you could come in partway through the year. You didn't have to just do it for the first payroll run. So just something for people to remember for the first time. Because
those figures are year-to-date figures. It's a cumulative figure that you're giving the ATO. So even if you do something where, you have to maybe there's a correction somewhere along the line or you need to adjust something along the line, it's cumulative. So as long as you've did something within the year, it will have given the cumulative year-to-date figures, and then moving forward it would be accurate. So that's a good system. Thanks for doing that. It means that we didn't have to go back and do stuff at the beginning of the year as well. So let's talk a little bit about the stimulus packages. We've talked a lot on Small Biz Matters about these with various ATO and accounting and bookkeeping experts on how to access them and how to do it right. So what difference do those stimulus measures make with end of financial year reporting for this year?
So as you and your listeners are aware, these employer cash flow boost, JobKeeper all, started running from March, April, have at this stage, subject to decisions from government, run through to September. So they cross over 2 financial years. So firstly is probably understanding when have you received those monies. We're probably okay today because we're on 30 June. So anything up to today will go into your 2020 tax return. It's probably just being aware of, if you do your tax return in September, of making sure you split between the two. Mm-hmm. There's different tax treatment on the different stimulus packages. So just briefly, JobKeeper. So a payment that a business gets under JobKeeper is income. In essence, it's because it's effectively a wage subsidy or a covering the wages. So it's got those characteristics of income. So you do need to include that in your assessable income. Your wages for your employees that you've paid out, all the $1,500 a fortnight, given their wages, that's a deduction. So those two parts of it do need to go into your tax return. So make sure you keep the JobKeeper goes in as assessable income. If you've received credits through the cash flow boost for employers, so that's where you've received the credit on your activity statement when you've got employees. That is what we call, really great tax term, non-assessable, non-exempt income. Now, the most important part for your listeners, non-assessable means it doesn't go in your assessable income for your tax return. So you won't pay tax on that. It doesn't come in there. The non-exempt part means there might be some income tests or some other things where that's taken into account for other sort of entitlements. It's really one of those ones where the main message is it's not going to go into your assessable income, but talk to your account. Just because it doesn't go into your assessable income, make sure it's part of what you have prepared for your tax agent if you use one, because there might be other parts of the tax return it does need to go on to be reported on but not have tax paid on.
And again, a really good idea is to just flag it and just inform the accountant or the bookkeeper what it is, or, they're probably going to recognise it anyway because we're seeing them dozens and dozens of times. But it's a good idea to say this was JobKeeper, something that highlights what it is, so that if they're doing the coding for you, they're the ones who can find it easily and pop it into the correct account.
Yeah, if any of the listeners did access any of their superannuation under the early release of super that was available for small business owners as well, that is not income. That's not taxable income, because effectively that is a withdrawal of your own money from superannuation. So there's no tax consequence on that withdrawal. It's not reported, needing to be reported either. So they're probably, Alexi, the three big ones out of those stimulus packages for small business owners to keep in mind of when they go to prepare their tax return for 2020.
Right, and that's really it. I mean, that's as complex as it gets when it comes to the stimulus and the way that it links with the end of financial year. Am I right?
It pretty much is. The thing where is if you've been entitled to and accessed any other sort of government grants or payments from a state government or a federal government, there's no hard and fast rule on those, because a lot of them it depends on what the grant was for. Often, the guiding principle is if the payment is to replace income, then generally it would be treated as income. But it is more on there's a series of ones across different states and different levels of government. We are at the moment, and they keep changing, so it's hard to keep hold of the list. The last count, I think there was well over 70 different ones across the country. We are looking to provide as much guidance as we can on this ever-changing list, but it's really one of those ones. If you've received something else related to COVID or even from the bushfire payments, one of those ones, as you said before, Alexi, flag it to bring it to your attention of your accountant, or if you're not using an accountant, give the ATO a call to actually go through that specific one and get some advice. But it would be great if there was a hard and fast rule to say, no, it's all not income or these ones are income, but it really does depend how the grant's set up and what purpose it's for.
Exactly. And one of the reasons why that's complex is because you may have received a grant that says you specifically need to pay out this grant towards, I know with the New South Wales Small Business Grant, for example, it needs to be used for operating expenses. So you'll need to show at some point that the exact amount that not the exact, but the amount that you've received has been paid towards those amounts. So if you're not sure, first stop is always your tax or BAS agent to work out how to code this. And remembering that this is all about the end of financial year, we're not necessarily speaking about your June BAS. We're talking about end of financial year, but you need to get these things straight as you go. So if you're reconciling something right now in your accounting software and you say, I'm not sure how to do this, now's a good time to ask because it's fresh in your mind and it's fresh in the minds of your bookkeeper, BAS agent as well, and ask them how to do it and they'll be able to guide you and then you don't have to worry about it again because it'll be correct. We're going to take a quick break here on Small Biz Matters and after the break I'm going to be speaking some more with the ATO about the different types of support and relief and assistance that they're offering to small business in relation to all the crises we've been through in the last few months. You're listening to Triple H 100.1 FM. We'll be back after this. So you're listening to Triple H 100.1 at the moment, and we are embedded in end of financial year prep. And we're talking to Assistant Commissioner Andrew Watson from the ATO, who knows all about small business and the way it ticks, in particular what's been going on in the last few months. And one of the things we need to be aware of with end of financial year at the moment is, I guess, the way that the ATO is treating these different disasters and the kinds of relief that are out there. So it's not just a Band-Aid, you're experiencing this, so we're going to do this for you. It really does depend on the sort of crisis you've been affected by, maybe the multiplier effect that ensues as well. Andrew, tell me, what if a small business is impacted by multiple disasters? So what if they've got, one thing after another? How can they seek help from the ATO?
The first thing, our first priority is particularly those that have had multiple disasters is for them to look after their own health. We've found particularly, we've got some great material, ato.gov.au/small biz mental health, but particularly the greatest issues we've seen is people who have been impacted by these disasters and then not reached out to their bookkeeper, not reached out to their accountant, not talked to us, and I've never seen the problems or issues go away as a result of that. So encourage people to look after their own health so they can actually then engage with others. We've had, and the bushfires, at times it seems a long time ago. I look at my calendar, 6th of March, I was on Kangaroo Island doing some sessions with impacted small businesses, and it feels like a lifetime ago, but it is 3.5 months ago. And those issues, those businesses are still feeling the impacts of the fires, and now they've got the COVID impacts of tourism. So I know there's similar stories across all of the states. The blanket deferrals we had for the bushfires for lodgement of payment through 28th of May have now gone, but there are things we can do to support small businesses that are impacted by any or multiple of those different events that you mentioned before. We can defer obligations and payment by up to 6 months where required. If you're on a quarterly reporting cycle, you can switch to monthly if it's going to generate credits and refunds through your activity statements. You can look to vary pay-as-you-go instalments if you've paid earlier in the year but your circumstances have changed, to be able to vary that down. We are in a position to remit penalties and interests for debts incurred after 23rd January. And we can actually work with you to go through what's a payment plan that might be outside of the normal terms that will help you continue through with your business. The main thing, Alexi, with all of these is either you can contact us directly. So we need to have a conversation around this stuff. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So a business can call us directly on our emergency support line, which is 1-800-806-218. Or, just as importantly, your BAS agent, your tax agent, they can also talk to us on your behalf, and they can get the same sort of support through the emergency support line. So it's really about now for us, what's the right support for your circumstances? And the only way we can really do that is if you or your representative talk to us, and then we can work through what of those options might be the best for you. And
I do appreciate that you're stressing the importance of that open line of communication. It's not a good idea to wait until this is doubled down and the experience is worsened and worsened and worsened, and you're really putting this on the back shelf because you're fearful of what might occur when you have that conversation. The fact is, it's better to have it earlier. There's nothing to fear. The ATO is there to support. I've spoken to a number of assistant commissioners who have said in the past, it's not in our best interest to put people out of business, because then we don't get anyone paying tax, and that doesn't work for the community as a whole. No. But getting in on the front foot and having that conversation and saying, okay, well, look, I can see something's happening, because there are copious notes that are made by the ATO customer service people. They keep on writing notes about your account. They can draw back on those and see, oh yes, you did flag that with us a couple of months ago. Thanks for letting us know. As a result, there is this and this and this, and that conversation should be fairly fluid at the moment because of all the weird and wonderful things that are going on. And like you said, it's individual. Each business needs to be treated as an individual.
Look, and we have, it's no longer out and about talking to small businesses. It's been virtually talking to small businesses and their representatives at the moment. But overwhelmingly, the feedback we're getting is when people are actually talking with us, they are getting the right sort of empathetic response from the ATO. So do encourage people, exactly as you said, Alexi, talk. The earlier you talk to us, if you're seeing an issue, we've got flexibility, and often it's more flexibility than people actually realise to be able to support through. Yes, tax is tax under the law. It does need to be paid, but we can work through how that happens so that it can best suit your circumstances, especially in the current environment.
And of course, the hold times have been improved. Have you put on more staff to be able to help with the number of calls that you're getting as a result?
Yeah, across both for businesses and for individuals, we've had an unprecedented level of calls. We were, when the JobKeeper package and early release of super were announced, not long after that, we were getting call volumes higher than the tax time levels, and we've still recently been getting sort of upwards of 60,000 calls a day, but we've had more people on. So yes, our queue times, hold times aren't that long. People are able to get through, and likewise, as we've said, given tax time is just about to hit us, we've actually trained up even more people to be able to help on those lines.
That's fantastic. And look, thank you as well. But I just would encourage anybody who's ringing to be patient, because obviously it's end of financial year, plus crises, plus COVID, plus stimulus, adds up to possibly being a difficult time to contact. But then having said that, you've extended your opening hours for the phone lines. Do you still have the process whereby people can get a call back if they're a small business?
Yes, we do. We do. What we're finding at the moment, because we've got the hold times are pretty reasonable, so we're not having as much demand on that as we might have seen previously, which is, I think it's a good
indicator.
One.
Yeah.
However, exactly as I said, Alexi, we are preparing. We're expecting sort of the end of July. We're going to probably have we're planning for the busiest tax time ever. With all these things happening. So we hope we can continue to keep that up, but we know there'll be times when everyone's trying to get through to the ATO. There'll be those longer queues, and that callback service then will probably be more useful for small business people if they're finding that they're hearing up there's going to be a hold time that is going to get in the way of them getting on with their business, then use that callback service.
Fantastic. And of course, on the ATO website, which is a lot easier to navigate than it was a few years ago, there's some really good support mechanisms there. There's great videos to watch if you go to the Small Business Newsroom. Make sure you subscribe to that as well, because there's some great updates and easy to digest small bits of information as part of that newsletter that goes out to over 2 million businesses. Make sure that you're on that list as well so you can get that information from the ATO. There are a couple of changes that you wanted to quickly highlight before we come to the top of the hour, Andrew, about changes to the website. So, of course, those of people who are not aware, there's been change to the new MyGov ID system to be able to access the website. Could you quickly take us through that process?
Yeah, so those people who've previously used the business portal to access some of the digital services from the ATO, the AusKey was the way you logged into that. That reached the end of its life at the end of March this year. And so we've been building over the last year or so a thing called MyGov ID, which is a digital credential. It starts with an app on your phone that you use to register your identity. And then that is effectively then becomes your digital key to use our business portal.
That's like two-step authentication, which people who use software or other pieces of online services might be familiar with. It's like an authenticator.
Absolutely. And the difference was an AusKey, in effect, had to physically be on the machine you were logging into. Because this identity credential is portable, it's independent of the machine. So if you do need to, you can, home computer, iPad, office computer, doesn't matter anymore. So that gets into the business portal. Maybe be something that I come back in 6 months' time or so. We're revamping the business portal at the moment to actually make it a much more modern and add some greater functionality to help small business self-serve, but also in a complementary way to what your tax and BAS agent can use. So we're pretty excited. It's been, as you said, there's been lots of stuff going on with building stuff for JobKeeper and Early Release Super that has put a bit of pressure on that program, but we're full steam ahead with that. And looking by the end of this year, we'll start to have a new platform that we'll start testing with some small business owners, check this all working right before we open it up for everyone.
See, Andrew, you sound like a small business owner. You're all excited about your new website, which is just about to launch, and you can get it out to your clients and do some beta testing and see if everybody's happy with that. So if you need any tips on how to run a really good website, just chat to any small business owner. They'll be able to help you out.
Okay, will do.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on the program here on Small Biz Matters, Andrew. Of course, people can find out more via the ATO website and just go and explore and find out lots of top tips for small business. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today.
My pleasure, Alexi. Thank you.
Now, if you've just joined us or if you missed out of any today's podcast, you can catch up via smallbizmatters.com.au or via iTunes and Spotify. And if you happen to enjoy this podcast, please give us a little star rating. That really helps us with our podcasting. And of course, make sure you check in with your local community radio station, not just Triple H, but all over the country. They are fantastic web radio stations that you can connect with that are linked in with your community and offer great educational programs. You've been listening to Small Biz Matters with Alexi Boyd. I look forward to seeing you all next week, and have a lovely week and end of financial year.